Hey folks, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today on the channel, we are taking a look at Machine Gods of the Noxian Expanse. This is one of the newest games from Black Oath Entertainment, Alex T., one of the hardest working dudes in the RPG industry. I say this is one of the newest games because there's a very good chance that since I have received this, that he has released one or two other games. I own a ton of games from Black Oath and from Alex T. Some of them we've taken a look at on the channel before. Some of them I still need to look at. For some examples, we've taken a look at Sacrifice, and this is the branded edition. So this is kind of like the complete edition that has all of the rules from the expansion in it. Really cool game, very kind of brutal medieval fantasy that has some really neat things with sentient weapons. And also there is Warlord Ascendant, which is a skirmish game set in the world of Sacrifice. Sacrifice also does have some expansion zines. There is his game Rift Breakers, which is kind of a MMO style tabletop solo RPG. Very cool game. And then, of course, there is the big, grand, epic solo dungeon crawl, Caernarfon. I did a huge review on Caernarfon. This game is pretty fantastic. And then one of my favorite games from Alex T is Broken Shores. That was originally called God Shard. And this is a really cool kind of science fantasy game that has all kinds of hex crawling and dungeon crawling and solo RPG things going on. So yeah, Alex is a friend of the channel. Alex is a supporter on the Dungeon Dive Patreon. And hey, if you want to do that as well, you can. And I also support Alex a lot. But Machine Gods. Machine Gods, I think, is an excellent game for beginners looking for a next step in their solo RPG journey. Maybe you've played some very simple games. Maybe you've played Four Against Darkness or things like that, or little small one-page, one-shot games, and you want to look for something a little more robust, but not something that will overwhelm you. And I think Machine Gods is a perfect example of a game in that space. And we'll take a look here at in the beginning of this video on where it fits in my solo RPG spectrum. So there are a few things that Black Oath Entertainment games excel at, and that is interesting settings. I think Alex T does some of the most interesting worlds, and Machine Gods is no exception to that. This is kind of a post-apocalyptic, technological, feudal game set in a feudal world with these feudal kingdoms. It's after this great big kind of technological singularity where these AI gods have risen into power and humanity has kind of destroyed itself back to this feudal system. But there are these kingdoms around that are ruled by AI gods, and technology is kind of old and archaic and mysterious, so it's kind of like magic. This game reminded me a lot of the old Horse Clan novels. And I haven't read those in many, many decades, but if you have read Horse Clans and you like that, you might really enjoy Machine Gods. I think the setting is super interesting and it has some really good world building. And Alex T is just really fantastic at coming up with interesting worlds. And if you're really into the world, there's also an expansion called this is the Voidspire Territories expansion, which really expands the world and gives you more background into factions and all of that kind of stuff. He also has interesting characters. The characters all have really cool powers and weapons and all kinds of things, all kinds of different ways to generate different backgrounds. So you can really get into his games at a character level. I think the characters in Machine Gods are a little more on the simple side than some of his other games. And that's one of the reasons why I think this is a good kind of next step game for beginners. All of his games have very solid solo rules, and Machine Gods is no exception. There's a whole chapter on how to play this without a GM. here. And here we have, let's see, where is that? How to play. So playing without a game master, how to set up your scenes, the different structure for GM-less gameplay. You can also play these games with the traditional way with the GM and players, but I think his games are kind of made for the ground up for solo or for co-op. We have our various oracles here for answering yes or no questions, for introducing complications and surprise events that can help twist a scene to come up with interesting things. We have his standard kind of D100 action and theme tables, how to interpret those, coming up with a random action resolution, and then all kinds of ways to generate and handle NPCs. And so his books often have solid solo rules, and they are also all-in-one solutions. You don't need anything else to play except for, your dice and pencils and paper and that kind of thing. But you don't need an additional deck of cards. You don't need any kind of additional oracles. All of his games, or most of his games, have everything you need for solo role-playing all in one book. And then the expansions just kind of add more to that. So in my beginner's guide to solo RPGs, I introduced a spectrum system that I took a look at competing words and 4 spectrums. So we have simple versus complex. And of course, these are very easy games, and these are more robust, complex games. And of course, everybody will think of these spectrums differently. Something that one person thinks is complex, somebody else might think is simple because you have more experience. So just think of these in very general terms. We also have scripted versus sandbox. So scripted would be something like a game book, something like a fighting fantasy book or Destiny Quest or Fallen Lands. Whereas sandbox is something more open and more kind of a traditional RPG where you have more freedom to kind of go and do what you want, set your own goals, that kind of thing. And then we have journaling versus structure play. So journaling, these are more like creative writing games. We just recently took a look at Ghost Transmission as an example of a journaling game. These are games where you are usually just responding to prompts using creative writing. They don't have a lot of mechanisms. So journaling games are often simple games. And that is compared to structure play, which is more like a traditional RPG where you are rolling up stats and doing stat checks and having more mechanisms that are adding structure to the play. They aren't just creative writing exercises. And then finally, we have tools versus systems. So if something is a tool, then that would be like an oracle or a deck of cards, something that you use to play other games with. Whereas this systems, these are all-in-one systems. So the game book would include everything that you need. So on these spectrums for Machine Gods, I don't think Machine Gods is absolutely complex, nor is it simple. It's somewhere towards the simple side of things. So that's why I think it's kind of a great next step game. If you really want to dip your toes into a solid solo RPG that has all of the things that you think about when you think about an RPG, Machine Gods is a great example. Scripted, this is not scripted at all. This is fully sandbox. So you define your own goals, you go out on a map and you create the map as you are exploring, you create the NPCs, you create the settlements, you create everything. Everything is kind of up to you. And so that's why this kind of moves it over on the simple complex spectrum, a little closer to complex. This is not journaling at all. This is full structured play. It has rules for everything. It has mechanisms. It has step-by-step guides for exploring, for creating your character, for creating your different encounters and all of that. And then this is not a set of tools. This is a complete system. So everything that you need is in this one book. So that is how Machine Gods fits on my solo RPG spectrum. Now let's take a little look at the character and the book. So the book starts off with some really cool background information about what came before, about the rise of these AI systems, these rogue AI systems that became godlike. And I know this was written quite a few months ago, and we are now just discovering that things like ChatGPT are causing people to go into these religious psychotic breaks and things. So yeah, this is maybe not quite as fantastic as Alex might have originally conceived. Character creation is relatively simple. So a lot of Alex T's games are a little more complex on the character side. I would say that Caranathalis is probably the most complex because you have all of these powers and skill trees and spells and things. But the character for Machine Gods is relatively simple. We have your core attributes: strength, constitution, dexterity, intelligence, willpower, and presence. And to determine those values, you will roll 3d6, and you will do that many number of times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you will assign those numbers, and then you will assign the modifier. And the modifier is added to a d20 roll whenever you're trying to overcome a challenge. You have a target number. What's really cool is there is a kind of sliding target number, and we'll talk more in detail about that. That is something I really enjoy in this game. But if you were trying to do like combat and you were swinging a sword, you would roll a d20 plus 2, and then you would try to hit a target number or above in order to succeed. And so the score you're not really concerned about while playing. The score is used to derive some other stats, such as health is 2 times your constitution, and so on. And then after you have rolled up your attributes, you will determine your health, your defense rating, and your initiative. And initiative is kind of interesting in this game. In combat, the enemies all have a static value for initiative, and then each of the players will roll a d20 plus their modifier, and then you go in number order from highest to lowest. However, as the players, if you ever roll a 1 on your d20, a natural 1, then you have completely flubbed your initiative and you have to skip your turn. That's pretty brutal. However, if you ever roll a 20, then you get advantage on your next roll. So that's kind of cool. I do really like that. I don't know if I've ever seen a game where if you roll a natural 1 on your initiative roll, you have to skip your turn because you were running up to some machine to smash it in the face with a giant kind of void powered sledgehammer, and you tripped and fell, so you don't even get your attack. After that, you will come up with your proficiencies for your different weapons and armor. And there are a whole bunch of different weapons in the game, and each weapon needs its own proficiency. So that's a little odd. The weapons aren't separated into categories like blade or blunt or range or that kind of thing. So if you want to use a battle axe, you have to be proficient in battle axe. And as you level up, you can gain more proficiencies to use other weapons. If you use a weapon that you aren't proficient in, I believe you roll at disadvantage. And then you will pick a feat, and the feats are different powers. And so we have things like backstab or brawler, hardy, keen senses, lucky, precision warrior, provider, and so on. You can also choose to have a drawback, which is kind of a disadvantage that your character has. And for each drawback you choose, you can pick an additional feat. And I think you can do that up to 3 different times. You can also randomize your drawback. So by combining drawbacks and feats, you can create some interesting characters that have bonuses and flaws. We also have these traits and motivations. So this is just for background. This is just to help you flesh out your character. Names, where are you from, your vice, and also what is your kind of starting motivation. And this starting motivation can give you a clue about how to start your adventure, because there really isn't, the game doesn't supply you with a campaign goal. So that's why this is a full sandbox game. It really is up to the players to determine what they want to do, to set your own goals. And that can be a little intimidating for beginners. So that's why I do think this is a good game for that kind of next step beginner. You will also start with some rations. So there is some light survival mechanisms, but not nearly as many survival mechanisms as in something like God Shard / Broken Shores. You will start with the weapon and an armor that you are proficient in. And you will also start with 500 coins in your kiffle that you can use to spend on items and services when you go into settlements. So leveling up, there's no level cap. It goes up to 10, which costs 120 experience, but then each level after 10 also costs 120. As you level up, you will earn development points, and those development points can be spent on things like health. They can be spent on buying an additional feat, or buying a proficiency, or also by upgrading your attributes by 1. So you can upgrade your attributes. and there are different ways to earn XP. So like I said, this is a D20 roll high system. You're trying to meet or beat a target number. We have the basic checks here, which go from very easy to nearly impossible. So very easy, a target number is 5. Up to impossible is that 20. So if you had a +2, in order to do something nearly impossible, you would have to roll an 18 or higher. However, this also supplies a dynamic target number, and I love this system. And I don't think I've ever seen an RPG that has this in it. And to tell you the truth, this is something that I will just probably use in all kinds of Alex T's games, all kinds of Black Oath games that use a D20 roll high system. And so what you do is you take your total modifier. So let's say that you had a total modifier at jumping a chasm, and so you would have a +3. So you look at the +3 and then you cross-reference that with whether or not it is easy to impossible, and that gives you a different target number, a number that is different than just the standard target number. This is super cool because it makes things a little easier when your character isn't as good at certain things, and it makes the difficulty scale just a little bit as your character gets better at things. And it's just really cool because a lot of times, especially when you're playing solo and you don't have other characters to help you on checks. You know, my character here isn't very intelligent. I like to play strong, big F-off weapon dudes, right? So my intelligence is only a 9, so my modifier is a 0. So that does give me a better chance at doing things. And I think this is great. This is a really good way to scale things for the solo player, and I really do appreciate that. Combat is relatively simple. You have turns and rounds. Each combatant will have a turn and a round. And again, you will roll, depending on the weapon you use, you roll a d20, add your bonus, and then you have to hit a target number that is assigned to each enemy. The enemies, the game in this game never rolls dice. Everything is player focused. It's a player forward game. It also uses usage die for things, ranging from a D20 to a D4. So a usage die system is really cool for keeping track of things like chases or discovering clues or ammunition. You know, you might have arrows, and the arrows you pay for a D6 usage die. Every time you use an arrow, you roll a D6. If you roll a 1 or 2, that steps down to the next lowest value. So then you have a D4. And then every time you use arrows, you will roll your D4. If it ever rolls a 1 or 2, you are out of arrows, and then you have to pay again to recharge those dice. And every time you buy ammo, it steps up 1 die. So, you know, if a group of ammo costs 10, you pay 10 for a D4, you pay 20 for a D6, you pay 60 for a D8, and so on. You can also use usage die to keep track of going through a dungeon. Maybe a dungeon is a large dungeon, so it is a D12 usage die dungeon. Every time you go to a next room, you roll a die. On a 1 or 2, you step down die, and then once you go through your D4, you have found the objective room of that dungeon. So I like a usage die system. I think it is very handy. But in combat, you can take your standard action. You have a free action, which is a small action. You can take a move action. Range, this is all theater of the mind. You don't need minis. You don't need a map to keep track of combat. We have engaged in melee, nearby, or far away. And you can take 1 movement point to move to adjacent ranges. Very cool. I like that. I prefer that over a more tactical kind of grid-based combat. And then you can take your standard attack action, or you can do a number of different maneuvers such as charging or disarming, grappling. You can cast spells. Magic in this game is pretty cool because you don't really have spell books. You find artifacts that are blessed with spells that can use 1 spell, or you might find these relics that have spells in them. And so again, the magic in this game is kind of more like mysterious technology. And the characters you are playing, there are no classes, as I'm sure you probably saw. You probably realize that, even though I didn't mention it. We don't have classes. We are all reclaimers. And so we are out searching for relics, going through ruins, trying to find things to bring back to our settlements. That's kind of like the main system. The game that I have set up to play is a little different. I have a different kind of objective there. We have critical hits and critical misses, a few different conditions to keep track of, you know, blinded, burning, prone, poison, starve, that kind of thing. And then here we get into all of our spells. So there are 20 different spells, and the spells are a mix of utility spells and attack spells and healing spells. But like I said, the spells aren't from a spell book. The spells you will find imbued in relics, or you will find artifacts that are able to cast a spell, like some kind of ring that shoots out a laser blast, things like that. So playing without a game master, I think those solo rules in this game are very good. They're robust, but they aren't overly complicated. And so you will set up a scene, and you will actually have a scene handout that you can use. So you will work through scenes as you go, and you will keep track of the scene number and a twist modifier. And at the end of a scene, if you feel like your character was in control of the action, was in control of the scene, the twist modifier stays at 1. And what that means is at the beginning of the next scene, you would roll the twist die. And if you ever rolled a 1, then you would have some kind of complication. If your character isn't in control, that twist modifier goes up to a maximum of 3. So then you have a 50% chance of having some kind of modifier. When you have a scene modifier, you roll up on the surprise event chart. And this will help you keep things interesting. As your character gets deeper and deeper into the campaign and things start getting more and more out of their control, as the machinations start moving around and different NPCs are interacting, you will be out of control and you will have more surprise or unknown events. And to determine one of those, you roll 2d8 and you look at the corresponding table here. So 4 and 1, knowledge and forbidden. So there's some kind of forbidden knowledge that maybe you have gained access to. Maybe you've overheard a rumor that you weren't supposed to hear, and now your character is cursed with knowing that something is going to happen or something like that. We also have our yes/no oracle. We have a simple oracle along with the d20 oracle. So if something is 50-50 and you roll a d20, and if you roll a 10 or higher, that thing happens. Along with that, you can also roll a complication die. And if you rolled a 1, then you roll a d6 on the complication die, and a new character or an existing character's true nature is revealed. Reinforcements appear. A harmless NPC is actually an enemy agent, and so on. So there is a really good oracle and a way to add complications. We also have a simple oracle if you just want to use that. Ways to update your story arcs to keep track of your characters and your story arcs. So I really like this campaign sheet, and I like how it works with the twist. It's really cool. And then most of Alex T's games have these action and theme tables. So if you're ever at a loss, you don't know how to interpret something that happens in the oracle, you can use the combination of these action and theme words to help you come up with solutions. And so each one of these is a D100. So let's roll one up here. So see 77 here. We have take, and 77 and 30. Take peace. So take peace. Maybe we have to go somewhere and we have to negotiate a deal between two warring factions or something like that. It has ways to interpret the events. Is there anything else interesting? Is there anything interesting here? That's a really basic question, but I like that. A D10, 9. Yes, roll on the significance table. Okay, so then we would roll a D8 on the significance table, and it affects one of the PCs somehow. Very cool. So you can combine all of these oracles in very interesting ways to come up with something. Now, let's say you just needed to know something something random, you know, you didn't want to roll for it. Maybe an NPC was doing something. Maybe you were in this situation where there was some kind of trap or a bomb or some kind of explosion that this NPC was running over to defuse, and you had no idea how good that NPC would be at it. You didn't want to determine stats or anything. You could just roll up on this random action resolution, and that would be a D20 roll. You know, was the NPC able to disarm the bomb? 12. Minimal success. So maybe they disarmed the bomb, but on the way over they tripped or something and fell and hurt themselves, or in their rush to snip the wires, they actually cut off one of their fingers or something like that. And then when we get into it, it goes over how to use your usage dying system for tracking events and keeping track of time, kind of a timer mechanism. And when you get into your NPCs, the NPC portion of this game is very robust. We have different ways that the NPC will react to you, their reaction details, their emotional state, their gender, age, NPC motivation, NPC descriptors, their names, what are they currently doing, and then also finally enemy combat. And I guess another thing I should have mentioned in the things that Black Oath games excel at is the interesting bestiary. And this is also a good example of that. So we have all kinds of different creatures, a broken prince, a chrome giant. I would have liked to have seen more art describing, depicting some of these enemies, a chrome hound. But I do know art is a crazy, crazy expensive asset. Probably the #1 cost for all games is art assets. And Black Oath games, they always use real art drawn by real humans. They don't use AI art. So I understand why there's not a ton of art in the games, because that would be very, very expensive. Demon Touch, Demented Clone, and Echo Knight, and each of the enemies will have its stat block here. So this is really cool. Here we see the ghoul. So when you fight ghouls, you will fight 1 per player. So if you're playing solo, you will fight 1 ghoul. Sometimes you will always only fight 1, but the health changes depending on how many players. So, you know, 1 strong enemy versus many weak enemies. That's great. That's a great way to balance the number of players. And their stats will be based on those tables in the back when I talked about the target number. And so here, the Echo Knight, they have a defense rating of average. And so when you are attacking an Echo Knight, you look at the average column, and that ranges from 6 to 21, depending on how good your character is at attacking. And strength average, willpower average, dexterity average. So very, very simple stat blocks for the enemies, but I do like that system quite a bit. And then we also have ways to roll up what they do when they are at full health in combat or when they are at less than 50 health in combat, what types of actions they will take. So very simple, and I do enjoy it. And then we get into kind of the bulk of what you are doing in the game, and that is exploring. And so you will need some grid paper, some graph paper. And I think it's especially helpful in this game to have the large squares with the small squares. And you will start in a random hex. What I did is I wrote letters. So I have A through H and then 1 through 10. And then I can cross-reference those. And I did actually, where did it go? I did actually make a little handy sheet here where I can write in what is at each square, because I'm just keeping a really basic map where I'm just writing the major point of interest in each square, along with a little key to show what the terrain is and to keep track of certain other things. So for my key, in the upper right square, I'm keeping track of the terrain. So a J is jungle, an H is a hill, an S is a swamp, and a P is a plain. And then in the lower right-hand corner, I'm keeping track of if it's a settlement or not, and that is an ST. So we have 1 settlement here, 1 settlement here. This square here, I randomize. This square is called the Void Spire territory. And that 1 square, that 1 territory is all in this book. So this is a huge sprawling metropolis that you can visit in one of the territories. And so I just define that as being over here in the land that I am playing in. And the expansion focuses solely on the Void Spire, this huge, huge sprawling metropolis. And there are different random encounters you can have. You can keep track of different conspiracies and plots and kind of political things that are going on. There are a whole bunch of custom NPCs and different backgrounds for your characters if you want to have them come from the Void Spire, and also a bestiary that you can use for fighting in the city. So this whole book takes place in this 1 square there. So I just wanted to have kind of a general location of where that is. Now I'm also adding some things here such as these clues, because in the game that I have set up, let's take a look at my character here. And so my character's name is Merwin, level 1. Again, I'm a reclaimer, but in my background that I rolled up that I am an exile from a noble house, and I was exiled from the glass kingdom of Lux. So this is my starting square. It's in a jungle, it is a settlement, and it is the glass kingdom of Lux. And for my motivation, I'm saying that I had to track down some tech cultists who kidnapped a noble house's heir. And so what I'm saying with this character in this campaign that I'll play is that my character, Merwin, was a royal guard or the head of the royal reclaimers, and I was very trusted, but I noticed that there were these tech cultists who have kind of infiltrated the noble house, and they have gained the respect of the noble, and I didn't trust them. And it turns out that I was right, but nobody believed me. And these tech cultists kidnapped the heir, but they framed me. They framed Merwin. And so Merwin has been exiled from the Glass Kingdom. And I need to track down the tech cultists. And I need to find 3 clues. So what I did is I randomized the squares where these clues were to kind of give me some direction for 2 clues. And then once I find the second clue, then I'll have to find the 3rd clue. And so somewhere in this square is a clue and somewhere over here is a clue. I don't know what those clues are yet. I just wanted to provide a little bit of direction on the map so I have some pathing that I can work towards. You could also use the usage die system for when you are looking for clues. But when you explore a square, when you move into a new square, you automatically see the major point of interest in the orthogonally adjacent square. So since I started here in this square in the Glass Kingdom of Lux, I rolled up these adjacent squares. So to the north is a jungle with the ancient ruin. To the east is a huge archway in a jungle. To the south is an ancient ruin in a swamp. And to the west is a sacred gate in the hills. And so when you move from one square to the next, you will roll up the terrain, and depending on what terrain you are in, you will have a better or lesser chance to find additional terrain. When you roll up a new square, you will roll up the point of interest. It might be nothing interesting, perhaps a settlement, an impassable feature, a distinct landmark, or an ancient ruin. And this game also does have rules for dungeon crawling in those ancient ruins. Another interesting thing about exploring is because this is a world with technology gone awry, we had all of these old AI systems that were controlling the weather. Well, all of those systems have gone haywire. They are breaking down. Entropy has happened. And so each square, each time you move into a square, there is a chance for all kinds of different crazy weather that can have different effects. And so you do really want to roll up the weather each time you explore because it adds to that theme of things going crazy, these weather control systems going haywire. When you find a landmark, we have an object and a descriptor. That's how I came up with the sacred gate and the huge archway, 2 D100 tables that you can combine to come up with your points of interest. You also have an exploration event. Nothing of interest can happen. You come across some kind of hazard, you will roll on your hazard table, or some kind of encounter, and you will roll up on this encounter table. Now, there are no NPCs on this encounter table. I kind of wish they were. And one of the things that I'm doing is if one of these is in the bestiary listed as a type human, such as a ghoul or a slaver is a human, then I'm saying that there's a chance that they might just be a non-hostile NPC, just so you can maybe meet more interesting things. When you do come across settlements, it has a pretty robust set of tables for coming up with your different settlements, such as your names, how do they feel about strangers, their size, their government type, main industry, potential conflict. And then when you're in a settlement, you can kind of find different types of side quests. You have task generators. What is the target and what is asked of you? And also a chart here for D20 custom NPC encounters. And then we get up to our rules on exploring ruins. And so again, it will use the usage dying system. When you get down to a D4 and you roll a 1 or 2, you have found the last room, you have found the objective room of that ruin, so you will randomize the dungeon size. Each time you move into a new location in the ruin, it will be either a corridor or a room. The ruins will have special conditions: darkness, difficult terrain, toxic atmosphere, extreme heat, extreme cold. Each time you go into a room, you will roll up the room contents. You can also roll up the room details and the room detail theme. There are security systems such as traps and alarms. You have a whole table for different events, different things that you will find in each room, and different types of features that might cause things to have anti-magic or things to be enraged in each room. So it has just enough things, just enough random tables to keep things interesting without becoming cumbersome, without becoming overbearing, without adding too much. And so again, that does go back to my belief that this is a great next step game for beginners. And then we get into all of our gears. We have all of our special services. We have all of our weapons and things that we can buy, range weapons, melee weapons, different types of armor that you can buy. We have different things when you are scavenging. Here's your scavenge table. And then artifacts. Artifacts are special items that have a unique ability. We have different ways to randomize weapons, randomize armor, your gear, a different type of relic that can appear. And then here are all of your basic artifacts, such as the Boots of Speed, the Ring of Cleansing, the Sphere of Light, and so on. And then we get into our bestiary. And we took a look here at the expansion, but the expansion is just, if you want to have more of an urban adventure in the city of Voidspire, and you want to have, all kinds of things that will happen in Voidspire, you could play an entire campaign just in this book, or you could add the Voidspire to a territory on your map and then go there and explore it during a normal campaign. So yeah, I highly recommend Machine Gods of the Noxian Expanse. It is available on DriveThruRPG. Again, I think it's towards the simple side, but not totally simple, and it's not overly complex. It is a full sandbox game. You will need to define your own goals. You will need to create your own quests and adventures, and you will use the book to determine all kinds of things using those tables. It's structured play. It's not free form, creative writing, or journaling. It is a traditional structured RPG, and it is not a tool used for other games. It is a complete all-in-one system. So if you like things like interesting settings, interesting characters and bestiaries, solid solo rules, and you want an all-in-one solution, I think Machine Gods is a perfect place to start, and I do highly recommend it, especially if you're a fan of that kind of science fantasy, that horse clans, that kind of a post-apocalyptic setting that still has technology, but technology is weird and it's more like magic than it is spell books. Definitely check out Machine Gods of the Noxian Expanse. And thank you for watching this video. Take it easy. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.